120,000 soldiers trapped, no fuel, no ammunition, no food in Washington, the most powerful military machine in human history sitting on its hands because there's literally nothing it can do. What you're about to hear is not analysis. It is an autopsy. And the body on the table is the myth of Israeli military invincibility. Let me be clear about who I am and why what I am saying matters. I served as a Marine Corps intelligence officer. I sat inside the American national security apparatus at levels most people do not reach in a lifetime. I reviewed war plans, intelligence assessments, and logistics architectures for conflicts across 3 decades. And I am telling you with the full weight of that experience behind every word, what Iran executed over 5 days against the IDF supply chain is the most comprehensive, most surgically precise, most strategically complete interdiction campaign I have ever studied, not in briefing documents, not in historical case studies, ever in any conflict at any scale. What the mainstream media will not tell you, because telling you would require them to dismantle 20 years of carefully constructed narrative about the balance of power in the Middle East, is that this was not a military engagement. It was a controlled demolition. Iran did not fight Israel. Iran switched Israel off. And the architecture of how they did it, the sequencing, the targeting logic, the operational discipline required to execute 5 simultaneous phases against redundant systems without a single phase failing, that is what I'm going to walk you through today. Because once you understand the mechanics, you will never look at this region or at American power the same way again. Start with the foundational reality that almost nobody in Western commentary is willing to state plainly. A modern army does not run on courage. It does not run on training. It does not run on ideology or nationalism or the quality of its officer corps. A modern army runs on logistics, fuel, ammunition, food, spare parts, medical consumables, the invisible river of material that flows from port facilities through road and rail networks into forward depots and ultimately into the hands of the soldier in the fighting position. Cut that river. And the most sophisticated military force on earth becomes within days a collection of very well armed, very well trained, and completely immobile human beings sitting in positions they cannot advance from, cannot be reinforced to, and cannot safely extract from. That is not theory. That is the operational reality that every serious military planner understands at a foundational level. The question that Iran answered over 5 days, the question that should be occupying every defense ministry and every war college in the world right now is this: how do you cut that river when the river has been engineered with 50 years of American technical assistance specifically to survive being cut? The answer, and this is where the professional sophistication of what Iran accomplished becomes genuinely arresting, is that you do not attack the river at one point. You attack every point simultaneously, including the points that exist specifically to compensate for attacks on the other points. You eliminate the redundancy by striking every redundant pathway at the same moment so that the system has no surviving mechanism through which to route around the damage. When every port is struck, every bridge is destroyed, every forward depot is burning, and every airfield capable of receiving heavy cargo aircraft has cratered runways, there is no logistics system left. There is only the clock that counts down from whatever stockpile remains to the moment when the last round is fired. The last fuel tank runs dry and 120,000 soldiers confront the physical reality of what supply chain collapse actually means for human beings in active combat conditions. Iran did not improvise this. I want to drive that point home because the instinct in Western analysis, and I have watched this pattern play out across 3 decades of professional observation, is to explain away military success actors as luck, as confusion, on the other side, as some operational anomaly that preserves the underlying assumption of Western superiority without requiring anyone to revise it. That instinct is analytically bankrupt. In this case, what Iran executed was the product of years of systematic intelligence collection, target development, and operational planning. Years. The precision with which Iranian targeting databases reflected the actual locations of IDF forward logistics depots, facilities whose coordinates represent some of the most closely held operational security in the Israeli military system, is a finding whose intelligence implications extend far beyond the immediate military situation. Someone built that database, someone updated it, someone verified it against current operational configurations, and that process did not begin last month. The campaign opened at 2:40 inches the morning on day one. I want you to register that timing because a specific operational logic. 2:40 inches the morning is the hour of minimum human alertness, minimum institutional responsiveness, and minimum ability to execute the kind of rapid damage assessment and emergency response that might in some alternate scenario have allowed Israeli logisticians to begin our routing supply flows before the interdiction was complete. By choosing that moment, Iranian operational planners ensured that the full scope of Phase 1 was complete before Israeli command could transition from shock to organized response. Phase 1 struck Israel's 3 functioning port facilities simultaneously. Ashdod, the primary military import terminal handling approximately 55% of IDF equipment and munitions imports by sea, absorbed 34 impacts in a strike package that lasted 28 minutes. I want you to understand the targeting logic inside that strike package because it reflects a level of operational sophistication that goes well beyond simply putting warheads on port infrastructure. The container handling cranes serving the military cargo terminal were struck individually, not the terminal, building, not the administrative complex, the cranes, because cranes are what move military cargo from ship to shore. Destroying the cranes means that even if a vessel somehow reaches ash through the subsequent interdiction environment, it cannot offload. The fuel offloading pier was destroyed in a sequencing pattern specifically designed to produce complete structural collapse rather than repayable damage. The distinction matters enormously. Repayable damage buys you days before the facility is functional again. Complete structural collapse buys you months. And in the context of an acute supply crisis, months is operationally equivalent to forever. The bonded military warehouse complex received penetrating warhead impacts designed to achieve internal detonation of stored munitions, not merely collapsing the external structure, but destroying what was inside it. Haifa, the northern port, serving as the primary logistics gateway for forces on the northern front, absorbed 41 strikes with specific targeting focus on its military fuel terminal and the rail connection linking port to forward logistics base network. The strike on the Red Sea port, Israel's only non-Mediterranean maritime gateway, was not simply a tactical success. It was a strategic opening move designed to trigger a cascading systems failure. 18 precision-guided munitions didn't just damage infrastructure, they erased it. Container handling facilities were rendered inoperable, and the road and rail arteries connecting the port to the national logistics grid were severed with deliberate finality. By sunrise on day one, nearly 90% of Israel's maritime import capacity had vanished, not degraded, not temporarily disrupted, gone. Yet focusing only on the destruction of the port misses the deeper operational logic at play. This was never about a single strike. It was about initiating a sequence. Iranian planners appeared to operate on a principle that many Western doctrines acknowledge but rarely confront in full. Destroying a node is meaningless if the system can adapt around it. Israel's logistics architecture, built with significant American input, was specifically designed for resilience, redundant pathways, layered contingencies, rapid rerouting capabilities, but that resilience became the target. Even before the first phase had concluded, phase two was already underway, aimed not at supply points, but at the connective tissue that made rerouting possible. In phase two, the focus shifted to overland logistics. 12 critical bridge crossings along primary supply corridors were struck with precision weapons engineered to achieve structural collapse at the deck level. This was not harassment or interdiction, it was elimination. Rail infrastructure supporting the northern logistics axis was simultaneously targeted at 9 carefully selected naqat, each strike calculated to maximize unusable track length from a single impact. The philosophy here was unmistakable. Don't chase the moving parts of the system, remove the immovable ones. Vehicles can reroute, convoys can adapt, but when every viable bridge across every alternate route is destroyed, adaptability collapses into paralysis. By the end of this phase, overland logistics wasn't strained, it had ceased to function as a system. Then came phase 3, where the campaign moved from visible infrastructure to the hidden backbone of operational endurance, forward logistics depots. These were hardened, dispersed, and highly classified facilities designed to sustain combat operations independently for a limited period. Their locations were among the most protected secrets within the military system, yet 11 out of 14 were successfully struck. That number alone raises questions not just about targeting capability, but about intelligence penetration and operational security vulnerabilities. The 3 surviving depots remained intact, largely due to their proximity to dense urban environments where the risk of collateral damage imposed constraints even within an otherwise aggressive targeting doctrine. What remained after these strikes was a drastically reduced zapas estimated to sustain operations for only 3 to 7 days at ongoing consumption rates, and that clock had already started ticking. At this point, one might assume that contingency planning would take over, that the system, though damaged, would activate its emergency pathways. But that assumption is precisely what Phase 4 was designed to invalidate. Israeli and American planners had long identified air logistics as the ultimate fallback, a rapid, high-volume resupply mechanism capable of bypassing disrupted sea and land routes. Iranian planners anticipated this. They didn't wait for the air bridge to be activated. They preemptively dismantled it. Runways at Ben Gurion International Airport were struck at multiple naqat with penetrating munitions designed to create deep, repair-resistant craters. Ramon Airport was hit simultaneously. Military airfields capable of handling heavy cargo aircraft had already been degraded in earlier strikes. The result was not temporary disruption, but functional denial. By the end of Phase 4, there was no viable air corridor for a large-scale resupply. The contingency wasn't just blocked, it was erased before it could even be implemented. This wasn't reactive warfare. It was anticipatory design executed with precision. What follows is not speculation, but arithmetic, the unforgiving mathematics of logistics under combat conditions. An armored brigade consumes roughly 180,000 liters of diesel per day across its vehicles and support systems. Multiply that by 8 active brigades, and the daily requirement becomes immense.
With fuel reserves reduced to approximately 40% of pre-campaign levels, the available supply translated into just 4 to 6 days of sustained operations.
By day 5, fuel levels dropped below operational thresholds. Vehicles weren't destroyed, they were immobilized. Tanks, artillery, transport units all rendered static by empty fuel tanks. The distinction matters. This wasn't defeat by force, but by absence. Aviation fuel presented an even tighter constraint, with daily consumption exceeding 2 million liters and reserves estimated at 8 days post-strike. Conservation measures began almost immediately. Sortie rates dropped by over 60% by day 5, High-value platforms, including advanced strike aircraft, were no longer constrained by mission availability but by fuel rationing. Operational doctrine built around air superiority and rapid strike capability began to erode under the pressure of simple scarcity. Ammunition followed the same trajectory. Artillery units operating at sustained fire rates consume hundreds of rounds per day per battalion. Across multiple fronts, total expenditure reaches into thousands of tons daily, with forward depots largely eliminated. Remaining stocks were insufficient for prolonged engagement. By day 5, units began reporting depletion. Fire missions weren't scaled back due to strategy, they were canceled due to absence of supply. And then there is the most human variable, food. Often overlooked in strategic analysis, yet fundamental to combat effectiveness. Feeding 120,000 personnel requires hundreds of tons daily. With only limited forward reserves and disrupted supply lines, units began exhausting emergency rations by day 4. By day 5, reports indicated declining combat effectiveness due to nutritional insufficiency. That phrase, clinical as it sounds, translates into something far more immediate: hunger. And hunger changes behavior. It alters decision-making, reduces endurance, weakens cohesion. An army under such conditions is not the army its doctrine assumes. What emerges from the sequence is not just a successful strike campaign, but a comprehensive systems-level disruption engineered across multiple domains. Each phase was not an isolated action, but a component of a larger architecture designed to remove redundancy, preempt adaptation, and compress timelines. By the time external support could be mobilized, the internal capacity to sustain operations had already begun to collapse. This is where the broader implications begin to surface, particularly regarding assumptions about rapid resupply, strategic depth, and the reliability of contingency planning under coordinated multi-phase disruption. The gap between theoretical resilience and operational reality becomes impossible to ignore when every fallback option has already been accounted for and neutralized before it can be used.